I'm Greg Johnson, CEO and chairman of Metallic Minerals and chairman of the Metallic Group of Companies. Metallic Minerals is a silver, gold, and copper-focused explorer developer with key assets in the Yukon's famous Keno Hill Silver District and the Plata mining district in the southwestern U.S., along with a portfolio of gold royalties that we're moving towards development in the famous Klondike Gold District.
Greg, good to see you. We haven't seen you for 3 years. You've changed. You're almost half the man I knew. No, you've lost a lot of weight, is what I wanted to say. So, look, I think we're going to rather than refer back to anything we talked about, back then, life has changed, very different, tumultuous times since we last spoke. So I'm interested in what you're doing now. So, Keno, Silver, La Plata, and you kind of got the royalties. Can we start with the kind of, I guess, most recent news, which is obviously to do with La Plata and Newcrest. So what's happening there?
Yeah, so La Plata has been a recent development, certainly since, I guess we probably had just acquired it when we spoke, if we spoke in 2020. We picked it up in late 2019. What we were excited about was a porphyry system in the southwestern U.S. with good infrastructure that had seen work by big players, Rio Tinto, and Freeport historically, but hadn't seen exploration for 50 plus years. And so coming in and bringing our experience at Nova Gold, at Galore Creek, which is one of Canada's largest copper, gold, silver porphyry systems, a style of porphyry we call alkalic systems. They're more mafic, so they've got a high precious metals content. We came in and were able to do the very first, apply our toolbox exploration. So the first soils, first time the district's been consolidated under one owner, first airborne geophysics, ground-based geophysics, and then hit the ground in 2020 with some confirmatory drilling and basically underground sampling in the historic adit. Allard, and then in 2022, we delivered the first resource, so a combination of drilling from past groups like Rio Tinto and Freeport and ourselves. So just under 1 billion pounds of copper with about 15 million ounces of silver, so a copper-silver porphyry system. We knew the system had potential for other precious metals like gold and PGEs. After the resource in 2022, we did the first kind of step-out drilling. So porphyry systems are big. You got to come up with some vectors. Which way are we going to drill on this thing? So we drilled 2 big holes, a 900-meter hole to the south, an 800-meter hole to the north. Both of them, top to bottom, continuous porphyry-style mineralization. But the southern one said, okay, you're getting out of the system. The northern one, which was the easternmost hole ever drilled, basically had the biggest hit ever hit at La Plata, 800 meters of continuous mineralization, about 0.41 equivalent copper top to bottom, lower 500 meters, 0.55, and then the lower 350 meters, almost 0.7. And it ended in the classic, very, very high grade at the very end of the hole. We got into some mechanical issues, but we basically ended in 2.5% copper, 50 grams of silver, and 11 grams of gold plus PGEs. So just a spectacular intercept in the bottom in porphyry-style mineralization. So not a narrow structure or something, but, continuous box after box of porphyry. So we announced those results in February of this year. A lot of attention from the market with a discovery like that. That's one of the biggest hits in copper in North America in the last couple of years. Went to PDAC, had our core out, had a whole entourage of various major companies who are recognizing it's in the US, it's in a great location, and it has just had an amazing hit, and it's wide open. We saw our new friends, Newcrest, who are considered, one of the top groups in terms of gold and copper. They've got a couple of deposits, Acadia Ridgeway in Australia, which is world-class, 40 billion pounds of copper, and it was for many years the largest silver producer in the world. An alkalic porphyry like La Plata, like Galore. They came in recognizing right away that this system had a lot of similarities to Acadia, so quickly had a CA in place with those guys, and they went to the lead. They were on the ground doing their due diligence, deep dive, and we signed a strategic investment with them that we just announced last month. $6.3 million to take a 9.5% stake. The money is going to be dedicated to really continuing to understand how big and how wide the high-grade zone is at La Plata, and there's a warrant that would come in. That was a 40-cent round, so a premium to market, a warrant at 55 that would basically fund next year's program. So we're right now in the process of getting the drill ready. We're hoping to start drilling here in the next few weeks. And basically, the focus is going to be, let's offset that spectacular discovery hole and see what this can turn into.
Right. Here's the thing that confuses me, though, about this story. You're talking about nearest down like a billion pounds of copper equivalent, right? So, copper, silver, main constituent parts. That's a lot. That's a big number, right? And you say that Newcrest recognize it as similar to another project which they know, and they get that. The market is valuing your whole company. We haven't talked about the royalties or Keto yet, at less than $50 million, right? So what I want to get from you today is understand. If you don't mind, hone in on precisely what Newcrest is looking at. Like for them, $6.3 million is option money. They've probably got lots of bets across lots of different companies, working out where the next big thing is, right? But taking 9.9 is, you can't sniff at it, but for them, it doesn't mean much. For you, it could mean everything. So let's hone in on that one. So when you say they recognize that the potential of this where the market doesn't, so what exactly are they looking at that the rest of us aren't?
Yeah, so I think you make a really good point. I mean, Metallic has primarily been known for its high-grade Keno holdings, and I would argue a large part of our market cap is probably still tied to that. This is a new project for us that adds to that portfolio. The thing I think, what are the elements that they probably went into their calculus on this? One, they don't do a lot of strategic investments. So this is something that, they only get involved in things they think really, look promising. They have an objective to increase their copper production, so from 25% to 50% over the next few years. Now, of course, there's this new transaction with Newmont, and they highlighted the quality of their copper gold portfolio as the rationale. But effectively, what they saw, Cadia Ridgeway is a world-class copper, gold, silver porphyry system in Australia, operated by those guys, and it's really their marquee asset. They also have Red Chris up in the Golden Triangle, which they are currently developing. And geologically, it's also an alkalic porphyry system. So it's this high precious metal end of the continuum. Those systems, Cadia Ridgeway has been pumping out $1 billion in free cash flow for them, right? And they see the potential for Red Chris to be the same. And the hallmark in those systems was they drilled some deeper holes that hit some really high grade that have them recognizing, we're getting into the center. I'm talking about the early discovery days on those systems. And so looking at La Plata, here we are drilling on the edge of the system, continuous 800 meters of mineralization. That's half a mile of continuous mineralization starting at the surface. This is a big hit, right? There's a few other companies that have had big hits in South America, Filo and Solaris and Maramaca and a few others. But this is a big hit, and it's in North America, U.S. And that's one of the other important things to Newcrest was they were looking to build their U.S. portfolio. So we've got a system that's already got a resource that tells us it's a porphyry. It's already got 1 billion pounds. In the mining space, these companies often have kind of hurdle rates. A gold company doesn't want to look at something that's not at least 1 or 2 million ounces and has room to grow. And what the copper guys will tell you is they want to see at least 1 billion pounds and room to grow. So we're on the smaller end for porphyries at 1 billion pounds. There's a lot of room to grow. And if you looked at the class of these things, they tend to get bigger. But I think the thing that really captured Newcrest's attention was the grade. So not only continuously mineralized, but the fact that lower 500 meters was so high grade, particularly some of the key zones that were running, 0.8 to 1% plus type grades. And that's really what our exploration next phase is going to be focused on is, okay, we ended in high grade, the very highest grade in the hole. Now, if we had kept going, how wide will that zone get? So these first couple of holes are going to be really designed to try to demonstrate, how big is that, quite spectacular grade that we've hit in that hole. So, I think what they're looking for is, we can see you guys can probably grow this because it's open and it's a porphyry and they tend to get bigger. But particularly, I think this thing stood out because of its geologic similarity to these systems that they know probably better than anybody in the industry. in terms of these alkalic precious metal rich systems. And it stood out because this hit suggests we might be getting into the center of something comparable to Acadia or a Red Chris.
Okay, so again, just sticking with it for now, right? So that's what Newcrest see in this, and perhaps we all should start paying attention to some of those factors. And I won't get technical on this session, but maybe if you come back, we can get a bit more technical. But the 6.3 million plus whatever warrants come good, depending on what your share price reaction is. That money is to be allocated specifically and solely, at La Plata, or are you allowed to kind of spread that around a bit? And while we're on it, who's going to be operating, and managing that down in Colorado?
Yeah, so the money is to be focused on a combination of La Plata, but also general corporate purposes. So it's
fine, but not keto
for us. But it's not. We're not going to go drill holes at Keno for that. That'll be separate funding, for that. There's a technical committee that's been set up. So 2 members from each company. These are their key technical experts in these kind of systems. So budgets and targets and an approach will be approved by the committee. And what's great is Metallic is able to tap into some of that key expertise at Newcrest, and already we're tapping into some of their specialists. And so that's a real advantage for a smaller company. I mean, our team's got, most of our guys have got 20, 30, 40 years of experience and in these kinds of systems. I mean, Galore Creek for Nova Gold was very similar. That's now 50-50 owned by Newmont and Teck, and it's an alkalic system. But to have the depth to reach into an organization like a Newcrest and be able to tap some of their specialists is a real advantage for us.
Right. So cash is good. That came in. But the market didn't seem to like I don't know whether they didn't like the dilution component, or they didn't understand the need for that capital, or what the capital would be used for, or one would assume maybe they didn't like Newcrest coming in here. So that's maybe what the market's thinking, maybe. How do you view this in terms of your plans for building this thing out? Because you've got to build, share price, enterprise value for the company, and get your shareholders confident about your strategy, right? So are you clear about what Newcrest will be demanding of you as a result of this joint venture? And do you think that is good, or should be recognized as good for the rest of the company's endeavors and for your shareholders?
Yeah. So I think first, let's put it in context. We saw a short-term peak in our sector in late 2020, and the entire sector, especially the juniors, have been consolidating since 2020. So in context of where Metallic is at, this was a nice premium to market financing for Newcrest to come in. So it was well above the market, and the market did trade up to 40 cents, during that period of the announcement. We have traded back, so I think it's a great opportunity, but it's in parallel with the sector. I mean, these names all tend to trade together, same patterns up, same patterns down. And in general, it's been one, as you're well aware, this is a weak period for metals, particularly precious metals, from May till typically July is the weakest seasonal part of the year for precious metals historically. And the junior sector, look at the venture index. It's still almost pinned to its 52-week low. And just recently, I was reading that the venture volumes are as low as they were last time in 2002, 2003. So there is a lack of interest in the sector, but again, that could be a great opportunity for people who are looking to get in, at a really attractive, entry point in the sector. I think we're at one of those points here. It's crickets in the market in terms of volume. A lot of our shareholders, like Eric Sprott and others, primarily bought in for the silver, and we're going to be delivering a resource on that. We can talk about it, but this is new value. And so I think as we start to demonstrate,
what was that? What do you mean by that? New value? What do you mean by new value?
Well, your market cap, you're trading at, we would have argued it 6 months ago, prior to this drilling, we would have argued all of our market cap was probably, or 90% of it was Keno Silver, and the potential next door to Hecla in the Keno Silver District. So now we've got a second project that we've had big success on, we've delivered a resource. So there's a revaluation period here where the market's going to, okay, you've got that silver asset. That's still got a lot of value for half the Keno district. But now you've got something that has potential to be $1 billion plus value if you guys can prove up a porphyry system that's economic, there. So, how big is it? Well, we don't know yet, but we've already got up to that hurdle rate we talked about earlier in terms of where we're already at that kind of £1 billion plus level that's a minimum. Now, if we can demonstrate this has the real quality that could be something like a Red Chris or Acadia, even outside of scale, right? In terms of, those were billions and billions and billions of pounds, but just quality in terms of the resource grades, then that's something that will add value. And that was our experience at Galore. When we first acquired Galore for Nova Gold, the market didn't immediately shoot up to $1 billion value for Galore, but over a period of a couple of years, as we grew the resource, tripled it from what Rio Tinto had developed, then the market was giving, Galore on its own about $1 billion and Donlin on its own about $1 billion. So I don't expect these things to overnight re-rate because, one, we don't know what's going to happen. Let's get a few of these holes. I think these next coming holes are really going to speak for themselves. And if this isn't a one-hole wonder, then we ought to be able to replicate it with our offset holes on this and be able to start to demonstrate, well, how wide is it? But what's exciting is if I look at, well, what's the potential? Well, that was an 800-meter hole. We're going to have a drill that can go deeper than 800 meters this time. We'll be targeting 1 kilometer plus and a drill that could go up to 2 kilometers, but basically drill above it, drill below it, and start to offset it laterally. All of a sudden, you could really start to build big tonnage. And if we are getting into the center of a high-grade system, which it is high-grade, but how big is it? It really could be meaningful. And the type of intervals could be something comparable to what we're seeing in the marketplace, with companies like a Philo and others who are having these quite spectacular intercepts over very wide widths. And I think that's the potential here.
Okay. But it just kind of feels like either it's new value in the shape of, big copper project with a mid-tier group, taking a chunk of your company and, getting after what is already, a lot of pounds in the ground, or they don't understand that, or the fact that they've devalued this kind of the Keno silver project, because in terms of enterprise value, market cap, however you want it, or even share price, it's you're not kind of getting much recognition for what you're telling me you've got. So something's got to change, and that's got to either be the understanding in the marketplace about how you play this thing, how this thing rolls out. Or you're going to have to, I guess, let the metals price do the heavy lifting for you. Gold's already doing that. Silver, I guess, will follow. But how do you see this playing out? Is there anything you can do, or would you have to,
absolutely,
as you say, bide your time?
I mean, if we look back at the last cycle as a model, clearly rising metal prices help drive higher prices in these resources, right? The metal in the ground becomes more valuable. So if we, and I'm a proponent of the, this is another commodity cycle that we're moving into. They tend to be 6 to 10 years in length. And so I think we will see, looking forward, I think we will see higher prices, and that'll drive. If you've got a resource, that resource is going to increase in value. But our business model isn't contingent on that. Our business model is really about, okay, we're in that sweet spot of we've got a system that has scale, measured in kilometers. It's a 10 square kilometer alteration system. There's only one small area that's been tested. Last hole on the east is wide open. It's the biggest hole we've ever hit. It's one of the biggest in North America. And we're now going to start offsetting from that. That's really similar to the early days at Donlin Creek and Galore, where we were coming in on the back of the work done by majors. And we took a system at the bottom of the market cycle. And as we started to step out drill and we started to grow it, the market started to respond and value started to accrue. I mean, amazingly, Nova Gold, who's a $3 billion company today, started out as a $10 million market cap. And Rick Van Nieuwenhuizen and I used to joke, it's your turn to buy the shares today at the bear market bottom, right? There was no trading. But we brought in Donlin. It was already a sizable resource, even though the market was abysmal in 2001. And as we grew that, we tripled the size of the resource over 3 years. The market cap went up. And at first, the enterprise value per ounce was modest, but as we kept adding value and de-risking it, it increases. And the same at Galore. And so I would expect, if we have further success, we already have something that's significant. We've got grade. If we can now continue to grow both the high grade and the overall grade over time, I would expect La Plata value to get snapped on. And as we can start to de-risk it and grow it, that should add new market cap value reflecting, the caliber of that asset and the potential of that asset. And in parallel, we're looking to deliver the first resource at Keno Silver this year to daylight, hey, we've actually got, significant metal in the ground there next door to the high grade operation for Hecla. That also should be a value adder. And, for us, from our perspective, good projects are good projects. And if you've got more than one, great. You just have to be able to really, succinctly just tell your story and get it out there and show this is a value adding story. So it's not predicated on higher metal prices. I think on a flat metal price, we're going to add value. And as we de-risk through resource, PEA, pre-feas, feasibility on a project, historically, at least in the rising part of the market cycle, which I believe we're in, you can add value as you de-risk. The market will revalue on your EV per ounce or your discounted cash flow or whatever metric you use to be able to assess.
Right. Okay. So just stick with some metrics. So it's just, again, sticking with La Plata if we can. You got $6.3 million, the bulk of which is going to be spent on that asset. You know a lot already. What more does Newcrest need to see before it makes the next move? What is it that they want from this project other than we want more copper, we want it in the US, porphyries. It's an asset that we think we understand. What do they want to do eventually? Just sit and see how you perform over the next 5-10 years? Or is there some real kind of exit component here? Because you're not going to build mines.
Well, our folks, as you and I talked, before the interview, I mean, the way I view the sector is you've got mine finders and people who know how to make discoveries. And then once they have a discovery, to grow those and de-risk them through the engineering stages. And then mine builders. And those are really separate, things. So metallics structure, the way we're set up is if we can find something, similar to what our success in the past with Nova Gold and other companies was, and we can grow that and de-risk it, then you've got a great opportunity to bring in a major. And in this case, at least at La Plata, we've already got a major who said, we're very interested. And so next, this 6.3 will go into a really robust, probably 2-phase drill program this year, 5,000 meters to start with. And after you see those results, another 5,000
to do what? Why you seem to have a lot of plans already? So to do what? What questions are you answering with these 5,000 meters?
The big question here is: so we've got a drill hole that we just drilled that had that 800 meters of mineralization, in particular the lower 500 meters. 400 meters above that, there's 2 historic holes: one drilled by Freeport, one drilled by Rio Tinto, that both ended in mineralization. So, okay, you got a zone and it's open and it was good high grade. And then there's a deeper hole that also ended in mineralization. So we have 4 pierce points, none of which got through this zone. So one of the big questions we're asking on this first round is, okay, let's get in there and offset that hole above and below and laterally, and let's see how big that higher grade zone is. Because in most mines, to be economic, you've got to have a starter zone. You've got to have a higher grade component that you can get started with early on in the economics to pay off your capital. And so most major mining companies are looking for, where is that higher grade starter zone in this deposit? And what are the grades and what are the tonnages? Porphyries tend to get big. They're often measured in billions of tons of material and billions of pounds of contained copper. But the ones that are the real performers economically are the ones that have higher grade in a configuration that you can develop, and particularly early in the mine if you can. And so what I think we're really hoping to see is that, yeah, we've got that kind of lower 500 meters, but could that be 700 meters? Could that be 800? Could that be a kilometer of higher grade? And then what's the vertical and what's the lateral? But, it doesn't have to be massive. We don't have to turn this into a billion-ton system to make it interesting. Even 50 or 100 million tons of the kind of grades we saw in the lower part of that hole, those are going to be as good as anything on the marketplace or better.
Okay. Right. Look, I'm in danger of over-egging this one. We should talk about Keno. That was your number 1 project last time we spoke 3 years ago. It was more advanced at that point. What's happened since then?
Yeah, so Keno has been a process originally of acquisition. So the Keno Hill Silver District, one of the world's highest grade producing silver camps in terms of grades, started back right after the Klondike gold rush. There's been more value produced in silver out of Keno than the Klondike itself. Alexco was the operator there. They were taking it back into production. Tough markets, stumbled, weren't able to bring the mine online, and that presented the opportunity last year for Hecla to step in. They bought Alexco, they bought out the royalty, and so now this is going to be their highest grade silver mine in their portfolio. They're the largest U.S. producer, soon they'll be the largest Canadian producer. They've really shifted to a focus on exploration, and a lot of their targets are deeper, particularly that down dip component on Birmingham, but you're talking 800 meters a kilometer depth. As you go to the east, same geology, these structures continue, and we've got a number of high-grade past producers on our ground that show we've got potential for Keno-style high grades at surface that could be developed. So we have been advancing. We've got 40-something targets. We've advanced 5 of those to a more advanced stage where we've got multiple pierce points, and we're looking to table a first resource on 3 of those here shortly after the middle of the year, and then those are wide open. So we'll continue to grow on those. And our first objective is let's show we can table something that's multiples of years of production for the current mill as an opportunity to be able to fast track something without needing to go to a standalone, as long as it's compatible. And certainly our discussions historically have been, if you guys can find material in the Keno district that's on the road and is compatible in terms of style and grade with what we're mining, incremental ore is always of interest to a mining company. So, that's kind of our strategy there.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. You're in good company up there, obviously, with Victoria, and a story we quite like, Banyan, also down to your southwest, southwest must be, as well as Hecla. So the region is giving it up for sure. And so how do you fund all of that?
Well, we've got some money already in the company before the financing with Newcrest. We may that's flow through eligible, so we may look at doing a premium to market financing at the right time. Certainly not in this market. But we're historically, our season at Keno can start as early as May, and it can go well into the end of the year. In fact, Banyan does most of their work in winter. So I think this year we're going to hit the ground running at La Plata. So that's going to be our starting project. And then we'll look to probably start our follow-up drilling activity to step out on the new resources, post-resource, and probably in the latter part of the summer and into the fall. And so we'll probably look to raise some money. We've got some warrants and things that could come in. So at this point, we're still in the, get the resource out at Keno and and then develop our plans for follow-up on that. Starting at La Plata with phase 1 here in the very near term. And we've got an updated resource. It's an incremental resource at La Plata that's due out any day now.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll come back to that when you come back to it. And just again, to kind of round off the kind of run through the portfolio, as it were, Klondike production royalties. What's the update?
So this is unusual for a exploration company to have actual production, but those who follow the Nova Gold story from the last cycle may remember that we had a sand and gravel business at Nome, Alaska that basically brought in $1 million to $2 million a year. And that allowed us to take on the Donlin asset at the bottom of the market cycle. We had a similar opportunity here in metallic minerals to pick up a large block of unmined Klondike. What's the challenge for these mid-sized placer operators? Finding good ground that's got enough room that they can mine for, a decade. And so we picked up this ground. It was not mined because previously you may have seen the bucket line dredges that were used in Fairbanks and Nome and in the Klondike, these basically floating dredges that mined these river valleys. Well, those needed water and they needed power. It turns out Australia Creek, where our ground was the source of that water and power, so it didn't get mined. So it's virgin Klondike ground. We brought in Parker Schnabel, whose Little Flake Mining is the company that operates on Discovery's Gold Rush program. So our property will be the property that's mined. He's a serious operator. He produced $20 million in gold last year just downstream. He's ramping up on our ground. We receive an advance royalty in the spring, and then It's a variable royalty between 10 and 20% of all gold produced. So we're basically, we're providing a service for guys like Parker. We're acquiring the ground, we're getting the mining permits, and there's a nice delta here in terms of a hard rock mine might take 5 years to permit. A placer mine in the Yukon can take 6 months. And so we basically provide them a block of ground, a permit, move in, do your development drilling, and start mining. And so we're early stages of this, but we're looking to build this out into a royalty business over the next few years. And we got room for as many as 10 operators.
Okay, interesting. So what's that worth to you? What's that worth to the bottom line?
Well, it's early days still, right? So we're one of the largest holders of placer ground. We've got permits on about 8 blocks. We're working to get the others. So it's just starting, but potentially that could be $1 million or $2 million once he's up and running just on royalties, just with Parker.
Okay.
And either
it becomes a bit of G&A.
Parker, you might want to take on more identifying other high quality operators. We might build this into a sizable business. Could be something we could monetize. We could, sell it to one of the royalty companies, maybe at a nice premium, or spin it out. Lots of optionality, in this, but not a bad thing to have cash flow that's non-dilutive coming in.
Oh, that's great. It's great.
Covering your operating costs, and it's a somewhat unusual situation for a junior explorer developer like ourselves.
Yeah, I think there's a company called Go Gold. They've got a sort of tailings processing which generates a couple of $1 million a year for them, but it covers a lot of G&A, right? So that's absolutely. Why would you not?
Well, in tough markets, it might mean the difference between keeping the lights on and not, right? And being able to go after opportunities.
Like free money,
yeah,
almost. Anyway, folks, go to the Discovery Channel and watch Gold Rush Television. That might get him some more money to be able to give to you. Get the viewing numbers up. Okay, I think. Look, I think let's park it there for now. Okay, I would love you to come on and get a little bit more technical with us in terms of the geology and how you're coming at both assets, core assets, for sure. But for today, good overview, good catch up. I think good news on Newcrest. It feels like perhaps not getting the kind of credit for that yet, but perhaps will do once some of those assays come back and people start seeing what you're adding to the picture. Greg, thank you very much.
It's really appreciate being able to chat with you again. It's been great to catch up. I think it is going to be an exciting year for us. And as I said, big drill program in La Plata. Let's let the drill speak on this one. But yeah, hardly any values come in from La Plata yet. So from my point of view, this is the for sale sign is fully up here, folks. It's a great time to be taking a look.